For a luxury brand, many would argue that its flagship vehicle is the most important car in their lineup. Lexus has the LS, BMW has the 7 Series, and Mercedes has the S-Class. Acura, on the other hand, had the Legend, which has actually turned into quite a legend today. Now, ever since the company killed off that iconic name and replaced it with the RL, customers who fell in love with the original Legend haven't been as impressed. And it shows, since the fact that the RL was one of the top 10 worst selling vehicles for all of 2012, with just a sad 380 units sold. Acura's solution to the problem? This vehicle, the all-new RLX. Does it have what it takes to push Acura up the luxury ladder where its 2 other Japanese competitors have gotten comfortable? Let's find out. So the biggest problem with the old RL, I think, was the fact that it just printed really small. It printed kind of a fancy Honda Accord. With this all-new RLX, Acura is going with a new direction here. You can see they've had this new styling element here. They're calling it their Jewel Eye LED headlights. These are full LED headlights, and they come standard on every RL. Remember, that option is about a $3,000 to $4,000 option on its German competition. You can see the Acura shield grille is in full effect here. And it's probably the biggest grille I've seen on their sedans. You can actually see it showcases the new width of this vehicle. And it does have a nice presence to it, and it looks a little bit more expensive than the RL, which in my opinion, honestly, when you buy a car like this, you want it to sufficiently shout to people that I make more money than you, which the old RL just didn't do. With this new RLX, it's a step in the right direction. However, I do think the styling is a little bit too conservative. Looking at the side of the new RLX, it's about the same overall length as the old model, which is a good thing since this is already a pretty long vehicle. The company did stretch the wheelbase by about 2 inches, and that shows in the class-leading rear legroom. This particular model that I'm showing you sports the optional 19-inch multi-spoke wheels, which helps finish off the premium look that Acura was going for. Now, a new engine doesn't come along very often in Honda products, so I was pleasantly surprised to find this all-new, direct-injected 3.5-liter J-Series V6. Okay, so technically it's not an all-new design, but this is the first Acura model to get direct injection, as well as variable cylinder management. Here are the numbers: 310 horsepower, 272 foot-pounds of torque, about a 10 horsepower increase over the 2012 RL. Paired with the 6-speed automatic and now only driving the front wheels, it helps give the RLX class competitive power, but class leading fuel efficiency at 20 city and 31 on the highway. Now, with any other flagship vehicle, the interior must showcase the automaker's most impressive and up-to-date technology, which is where the old RL simply was just lacking. For starters, this new RLX is completely all new. You can see here, the center stack here is dominated by these dual screens. This is the first Acura to get the dual screens. You can also see this vehicle has a new key system for Acura. It's just a little bit different shape. It feels a little bit more expensive than their usual system. It does have push-button start. That is standard equipment on the RLX. The old RL, I believe, you had to get the technology package to get it. Now, of course, the vehicle starts up really smoothly. This does have Acura's new 3.5 direct injection V6, as I said. Now, this touchscreen here is 7 inches in diameter here, and then the 8-inch navigation screen up here. This separate screen here works your audio and your climate controls. The one cool thing about it, when you touch something, it gives you what Acura calls haptic feedback. The system actually just kind of sends a vibration back into your finger to let you know you've touched it and acknowledges that you touched it. It's a very responsive touchscreen, works much better than the Ford My Ford Touch or the Cadillac Hue so far. Now, the rest of the interior of the RLX is very impressive. You have leather stitching on the dashboard. It extends all the way down here. The rest is soft touch on this upper portion right here. You have this really nice wood grain accents, and then the glove compartment is electronic in the way it opens. It's lined with felt. It's 2-tier. It's a pretty good size. The rest of the interior, the steering wheel is very nice. The one thing about it, it's the typical Acura lightness with the steering wheel. It's an electric power steering, of course, but it makes the vehicle feel a lot lighter. I'll show you more on that when we get on the road. The door panels are pretty much the same, soft touch materials on the upper part, leather stitching right here. All 4 of the windows are automatic up-down. That's kind of expected with this type of vehicle. You have kind of a suede material on the headliner, and then of course at the center stack here you have an electronic parking brake. Acura's 6-speed automatic transmission, which does have a sport mode. It is down a gear compared to its competition, although I guess if you look at the Lexus GS, that also has a 6-speed automatic. When you put it in reverse, you do get a nice backup camera, and the mirrors do tilt down. It does give you trajectory and distance markers. It's a very nice system. Nice that they finally put up-to-date technology in here. Looking at the center console here, it opens from the driver's side, which is nice, and then it's lined with felt. It's a pretty good size overall. Overall, the interior of the new RLX is impressive. It feels expensive and it feels fresh, something the old RL definitely wasn't. One area where the old RL really just lacked was its rear seat space. Acura has fixed that with the all-new RLX. They're claiming almost 39 inches of legroom back here, which is actually the best in the mid-size executive sedan class. You can see here, the seats are very comfortable, the headrests are in the perfect position. It's just a really nice place to spend time. There is an armrest right here with some cup holders. The seats, however, don't fold down 60/40, but you do get this little pass-through to allow longer items to go to the trunk. There is some vents back here, and unfortunately the floor isn't flat. Kind of expected that. These big sedans usually don't have that. And then the materials in the back, they're all the same from the front. Soft touch, leather stitching, and just all premium materials. The cargo area from the RLX is about what you'd expect from a full-size executive sedan. Large opening, hinges that don't crush your cargo, and a nicely finished trunk. The rear seats, however, do not fold, but there is a pass-through. So I know what you're thinking. Is Acura really trying to sell me a front-wheel drive executive luxury sedan? Well, yes, but before you say no, you really need to take this car for a test drive. I know people in this class are all about rear-wheel drive cars. You have to have a rear-wheel drive executive sedan like this. However, Acura never likes to follow that crowd, and I'm not even sure they'll eventually ever put rear-wheel drive on this car. But, you know, the front-wheel drive model is very deceiving. It doesn't really feel like, you know, it is. I mean, you can notice it is front-wheel drive if you drive, you know, a BMW or a Mercedes, but this is probably one of the best driving front-wheel drive, you know, big sedans I've ever driven for several reasons. For one, the new 3.5-liter direct injection V6 is a gem. This is the smoothest Acura V6 I've ever driven. The 6-speed automatic, a very excellent partner. It's got really smooth shifts, and it's got a sport mode here. You can flip the paddles here, and it'll match some revs. And you can see here the engine makes a very nice, smooth, muted sound. It sounds even better than the 3.7 that was in the old RL. Now, the steering of this vehicle is very light. Typical Acura, it's pretty devoid of feel. It is relatively precise, but the vehicle just feels big. That's the one thing about the RLX, is it feels pretty big, but it feels big in a way that it has a big presence, but it doesn't feel cumbersome to drive. No, that's basically what you need to keep in mind. Now, the seats in the RLX are probably the most comfortable seats I've ever sat in a long time. And the ride quality of this car is just perfect. Acura really nailed that balance between a comfortable ride that's not floaty, as well as, you know, decent handling. The new technologies on the RLX are pretty impressive as well. Standard is forward collision warning, lane departure warning, and the lane keeping assist, which works pretty well on this car. The technology package that I'm driving here includes the blind spot information and the navigation system. Unfortunately, to get the adaptive cruise control with the low speed follow, you need to go for the advanced package. That's the new technology from Acura that will, you know, brake and come to a stop for you if you're in traffic, in case you're not paying attention. Now, when you are driving the car normally, it is just like a bank vault in terms of silence. There's very little road, very little wind, very little engine noise. You barely hear that engine unless you put your foot down. Which, there you can see here, the forward collision warning is trying to warn me, telling me that there's a car in front, which works pretty well. It's not too annoying. I've driven some other cars that, you know, can be really annoying. I kind of think instead of the big brake in that little screen, there should be some red lights on the dash. That's what Ford does. But speaking of that new screen, it is new for Acura. All the other Acuras, the screen in the speedometer is usually just a monochromatic display. It looks pretty old. In the RLX, it's color. It's a pretty big screen. They've definitely improved the technology in this car a lot. See here, acceleration for this car is pretty good. Acura says 0 to 60 times are about 6.5 seconds roughly, which is a little slower than the class. I mean, they usually do it in about under 6 seconds or 6 seconds flat, but this car is still pretty quick. The automatic is a really smooth partner. You know, it is down a gear or two compared to the competition, but I don't really miss it. Honestly, I think that's 7 speeds, maybe 8 speeds. I mean, they seem a little much for me. I always thought 6 was the perfect amount in terms of gears. Now, another big problem with the old RL was the fact that it just printed too much like a fancy Accord. This one, I have to say, feels more expensive. It feels premium. I think the reason being are those new, you know, LED jewel eye headlights, which Finally, Acura has a car with LED daytime running lights. You can see in the front, the car looks pretty impressive and expensive. And I like how Acura includes that technology as standard equipment on every RL. The, you know, BMW and Mercedes and Audi, they all charge like $3,000–4,000 for just LED headlights. You can see the handling of this car, you know, is not the best. I mean, you can still feel it's a front-wheel drive car. The one thing, it doesn't have any torque steer, which I like. I was expecting it to have some torque steer. It doesn't. The one thing, the new piece of technology that Acura introduced on this car to, you know, kind of make you think it's not front-wheel drive is their new precision all-wheel steer. What that basically means is, the system's pretty aggressive. What that basically means is the rear wheels, or the Acura's reintroduced four-wheel steering on this car. The rear wheels will turn opposite direction of the front to keep the, or to limit the amount of understeer. You're probably never going to notice it unless you take this car to a racetrack, which most owners of this car won't. But, you know, it does do a good job at hiding the system's mass. So I do commend Acura for introducing it. It's also cutely named Pause. It says Pause on the back. But anyways, if you guys are in the market for an executive sedan like this, I know Acura hasn't been on your list for a while, but I gotta tell you, this new RLX is quite impressive. And if you guys are one of the few people that live in the snowbelt states who can't deal with rear drive, and you don't really want all-wheel drive, I highly recommend test driving the new RLX. You know, this particular tech package at $55,000 is a lot of money, I must admit. However, keep in mind, if you're going to equip the German competition or even the Lexus, you know, at this level, it's going to be about $5,000 to $10,000 more, and that's where the Acura's value comes back. So if you guys are, you know, looking for something like this, give the RLX a chance. Go test drive one in your dealership. I think some of you might be pretty impressed. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you all later.